Hey, I'm Tommy Ellison, and this is Senior Moments. I can't tell you what I had for breakfast this morning, but I remember every detail of that time I came this close to being suspended my senior year in high school, just 3 weeks before graduation. So stick around. This is proof that some things from a misspent youth just don't fade away. Let's go. Well, hey folks, this is Tommy Ellison, and it's live at 5, and this is Senior Moments. I guess this could have been called Senior Memories, because these are just little things that come and go in my mind. And you know, like I said in the teaser, I can't always remember where I hid my car keys, but or why I was going into a room, but for whatever reason these things just kind of pop into my head, and so I jot them down and I'm sharing with you here today. This particular senior moment, or senior memory maybe, is a kind of an intersection of three memories that have some common denominator. I'll just leave it at that, because I never was good at math, and especially fractions. So I imagine that 6/10 of you guys will not really pick up on what I'm trying to do here. But this particular episode is called Sanctuary, Switches, and Second Grade. And the reason I call it that is because, well, again, in that first memory, I kind of flashed back the other day, and I said, who really gave me the whippings when I was a kid growing up? And maybe you could answer that question yourself in the comments. But well, let me just put it this way. My mom probably read in the Bible where it said, spare the rod, spoil the child. And so she was not going to have me be a spoiled child. And of course, you got to remember, this was back before, Dr. Spock and Mother Teresa and whoever else it was involved in the decision that you don't, whip your kids. That sounds kind of brutal, doesn't it? But anyway, that's what I went through, and perhaps those of you my age, you remember those days yourself. And the thing about it was, my mom typically was the one that gave me, let's just say, if we put it in a order, the most whippings of my life. In fact, she gave me whippings. They were like dime a dozen. It seemed like I could get 2 or 3 a day. I was the kind of guy that I could walk into the living room and a lamp would fall off the table and break in the floor. And of course, it's like, did you do that? And I said, no, ma'am, I didn't. You're lying. And go get the belt. And I mean, if I had a dollar for every whipping my mom gave me when I was growing up, I'd probably be, well, wealthier than I am now. So anyway, she was the one that doled it out when I was a kid. And I can remember we were living in Huffman at the time, and the only bathroom in the house, there was a closet there, and in the closet was a clothes hamper, and right next to the clothes hamper hung the belt. Now, I don't know if many of you remember a popular comedian back in the day had a whole bit about the belt. We had never seen the belt, but we had heard about it. That was the line. In my case, I saw the belt plenty of times. In fact, I would have to go get the belt, bring it to her. She'd give me the beating, and then make me take the belt back and hang it back in the closet. The only saving grace of this whole thing was the fact that the belt did not have a buckle on it. I was spared the buckle. I understand some weren't that lucky, but anyway, my mom, like I said, she was the one that doled them out on a regular basis. And now my dad, I can remember 2 whippings that my dad gave me, just 2. I mean, the first one, if I remember it correctly, we had my half brother and his wife and kids visiting us in our home there in Fairfield. And their oldest son, who was probably about 6 or 7 years old, at the time. I was probably around 10 or 11. My I couldn't have been that old. I was probably, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. But my back in the 60s, we had a maid because my mother worked full time, my dad worked full time. And so our maid for the family dinner that night had cooked a German chocolate cake, which was just happened to be my dad's favorite cake, German chocolate. Mom was fond of it too, and I didn't find it to be too distasteful at all. But on this particular day, Carlos called me into the kitchen and he lifted up the lid on the cake pan and he said, watch. And he started eating all of the icing that was dripping off of the sides. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I didn't probably take a little smidgen. But I can remember in the back of my mind thinking, this is not good. This is not good because I know better than to eat the icing off the side of that cake. Well, guess what? Carlos didn't have that distinction in his mind, and he proceeded to just scrape all the icing off of the sides, leaving only what was on top. And I guess he thought he was going to get away with it, but he didn't, nor did I, because when my dad got home, he was told that the two of us ate all the icing off the cake. And I said, Dad, I did not eat the icing off the cake. I mean, I was innocent. Now, he was in law enforcement, so I'm sure every day he heard somebody say, I didn't do it. I'm innocent. I'm not the one that should go to jail. But in the case of me being my dad's son, I was guilty until proven innocent. And in this case, I had no way of proving my innocence. The icing was gone. Carlos, I don't know where he went to. I guess he was laying under the bed or something. And so my dad went and got a big batch of switches off of a bush in the backyard, and he brought them in, and he had me go to my bedroom and lay on the bed, and he proceeded to switch me with about, I guess it was probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 switches that he had cut, and they were all with their leaves. The leaves were still intact on the switches. And so after he whipped me, and of course the leaves were going everywhere, he told me to go get a broom and sweep up the leaves. And so it was kind of like a 2-step punishment. Not only did I get a beating, but I had to clean up the mess from the beating that he left behind. And, well, that was the first whipping that my dad gave me. Second whipping is going to take a little bit more story, though, because it was about the day I ran away from school in the 2nd grade. And I was, I guess, motivated by the fact that the teacher for my 2nd grade class was what we called a lay teacher, because in parochial school, most of the classes that you had nuns. But Mrs. Sprouse, or I should say Ms. Sprouse, because she was an old maid, never married, maybe had the temperament that went with that, I don't know. But she was just meaner than any 2 nuns put together. And finally, I just got tired of it. Well, you know what you do when you get ready to, run away from school. You find, some like partner that's got a like mind. And so that's what I did. Bobby Anderson. I probably should change the names to protect the guilty here. But I don't know where Bobby is. Bobby was kind of a 2nd grade thug. He was the first bully that I knew in school, and he was always into something. So I figured he probably knew his way around running away from school. So he and I, on individual basis, asked to be excused to go to the little boys' room. And so Mrs. Sprouse probably didn't pick up on the fact that we were both gone at the same time. We rendezvoused in the little boys' room, and we started walking away from the school. The school was in Inslee. And if you don't know anything about the geography, Inslee is a suburb of Birmingham. And if you go a little bit further west, then you run into Fairfield. So Fairfield was probably about 2 miles, maybe 3 miles west of Inslee. Well, all that to say this, we started walking towards Fairfield. Now, Bobby lived in a little town called Wylam, and so I'm not exactly sure who was leading who here, but I knew that if we headed towards Fairfield, it was a familiar place for me to run away to, I guess. And so we started. Now, here's the funny thing about it. Looking back, we probably had a dime between us. And on the way to Fairfield, we stopped at this little Italian grocery store, and we bought a package of powdered sugar donuts. Powdered sugar donuts. Yeah, a little package, like maybe 6, and it was a dime. And we bought them, and we started to eat them on the way because we actually left before lunch that particular morning. And so we were getting kind of hungry, so we ate the donuts. And so we kept walking, and of course by the time we hit Fairfield city limits, the food was all gone. And looking back, I don't know if it wasn't a planned escape. It was really more spontaneous, like when you go in a drugstore or grocery store and that little counter that sits by the checkout counter, that it was like an impulse buy at the grocery store. Let's run away from school, or let's buy a pack of gum or a National Enquirer. Well, we ran away from school. Here's the problem. We get to where my house was, and it had to have been sometime late in the lunch hour, maybe 12:30, 1 o'clock, because as we're walking towards my house, my mom is walking out of the house on her way back to work. She worked about 6 blocks away from where we were living at the time, and consequently we hid in the bushes, and I watched her leave and walk out of distance or out of sight. And as we were laying in the bushes, the realization came to me that, Tommy, you are one big dummy, because you can't just run away from school and go home and say, hey, Mom, I ran away from school today. That's not going to happen. And that suddenly dawned on me, now I'm going to have to run away from home as well. I didn't really want to run away from home, but I realized that if I did run away from school and I did run away from home by design, then I was going to be in big trouble, and I didn't know where to go. Well, here's the deal. We walked into downtown Fairfield, and there's a big park there, and it's surrounded by churches, the Episcopal Church and the Methodist Church, and then there's the Baptist Church. Now, we were all Catholic, got to remember that. And so we decided that we would go into the basement of the First Baptist Church there in Fairfield and just kind of lay low and regroup and figure out how we're going to get away with this. And it was really kind of cool because they had a Coke machine that you didn't have to pay for the drinks. And so we sat there and we drank those little bottles of Coca-Cola for probably about 30 minutes, 45 minutes, maybe an hour. And it started to be getting dark outside. Not quite, but almost. You could start to see the afternoon shadows. And so we walked out of the sanctuary of the basement. I say sanctuary because in reality we sought sanctuary in the basement of the First Baptist Church. It's kind of like Quasimodo in the Hunchback of Notre Dame. He would go up into the bell tower and you'd yell, "Sanctuary, sanctuary." And of course the priest would provide him sanctuary as he tried to get away from the French authorities. And there we were. We were in sanctuary at First Baptist. This was before sanctuary cities. This was before sanctuary towns. And, it was kind of an unnerving moment because we were starting to kind of panic. And about that time, lo and behold, Bobby's mother drove by the front of the church, slammed on her brakes when she saw us, and yelled at us to get in the back seat of her car. And I knew a little bit about Bobby's mother, and I think probably what made Bobby so mean was how mean his mother was, because, you know, I thought she was going to beat us before we ever got back to the school, which we did. And I'm beginning to think, with Bobby's mother in the picture, it might not have been a bad idea for me to run away from home. Nevertheless, here I am with her son and her and me, and we got toted back to the school where my mom was there, worried sick that we had been kidnapped. And, we always tend to go to the worst case scenarios in our mind. And so I remember my dad did not get home for dinner at the usual time. He was working a case or doing what he was doing. He was law enforcement. And so I went to bed early. In fact, I probably went to bed as earlier than I've ever been to bed before, because I figured if I got in the bed and let it, the smoke clear, let the mad go away, then chances are, well, you know how grace works. You don't deserve it, but maybe sometimes you might get it. Well, it didn't work, because the next morning I woke up to the fact that I was getting this second whipping in my memory of my dad, with a belt, as a matter of fact. And it was it didn't leave any scars, probably a few bruises, but it did ingrain itself in my memory pretty bad that I did not want to be whipped by my dad again. It's funny, my girls, I had girls growing as in my marriage, and for whatever reason, my girls, they would get in trouble during the day. I would be out of the house working. And especially during the summer, because my wife was a teacher, and so during the summer she was at home and the girls were at home. And they were probably, 10, 11, not all that old. And they would get into constant trouble. But my wife was that person that always said, you just wait till your dad gets home. And I hated that. Mainly because I didn't want to whip them any more so than they did, and she did. But I've always had this idea that, punishment or reward should be as close to the actual incident as you can make it. In other words, if you sell a house in the real estate business, you need to get a commission right away. Get that reward close. Same worked for punishment. If you committed a crime, we're all guaranteed a speedy trial. Seems like they go on forever now. But I always felt like whoever was there when the infraction occurred, that should be the person to dole out the whipping. But unfortunately, I had a wife that kind of took a ball for on all that. And that proximity started to spread out, because she would say, you wait for your dad to get home. And so naturally, they had time to prepare for what they knew was coming. And I'll never forget, in one of these situations, and to this day, I don't remember exactly what they did, how severe it was, but I know old wife was mad at them, and they knew they were going to get a beating when they got home, or when I got home. And I walked up to their bedrooms. They shared a single bed in the bedroom, and there they were, knowing what was coming, laying on the bed, one on one bed, one on the other, and they had put on every pair of blue jeans that they owned. I believe my oldest daughter probably had 8 or 9 pairs of blue jeans that she had on her on her body. And Mary, did I say Mary? My other daughter had a similar number. But they were laying on the bed, and they had so many blue jeans on that they couldn't bend their legs. They couldn't even really get up off of the bed. And they both looked like the Michelin Man, if that visual makes any sense. You know, I can remember my mom telling me one time in the middle of a beating, she said, "This hurts me more than it hurts you." You ever hear that from your parents? And I'm like, are you sure about that? Because it sure hurts me a lot. I don't know how that makes sense with hurting you. That particular day, it did hurt me more than it hurt them, because my hand was ragged trying to work its way through the multi-layers of denim. I needed one of those bunker buster bombs on my hand to penetrate, to do, or to be effective. But finally, it just wore me out. And I was, not only was I upset with what they had done, but I was upset that I was the one that was having to dole out the punishment. That really, in this case, it hurt me emotionally and it hurt me physically. You know, I'm sure a lot more than it hurt him. So that's my story. You know, I never enjoyed getting a whipping. I never enjoyed giving a whipping. And I still haven't totally figured out why in the world I ever thought running away from school was the solution to the problem of a teacher that I just didn't get along with. I think that teacher cried when she realized we had run away. She had never had a student run away before. And maybe that was just a little bit of our revenge in the way she treated us. We made her cry, but looking back, I kind of hate to think that was the case. Well, this is Senior Moments, and I appreciate you being with me today. And I feel like I've wandered a little bit, but anyway, that's my story. I'm sticking with it. Evidence of a misspent youth. See you guys next week. Well, hey, thanks for spending a few minutes with me on Senior Moments. If you enjoyed the ride, be sure and tap that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. I'll be back soon with more stories from a misspent youth, and maybe some of yours too.